Good morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here. Welcome to Coffee. Today is Thursday, April 24th, the year of our Lord 2025, and certainly thrilled that you've decided to join me this morning to talk a little Gamecocks right here. Chief Sports South Carolina YouTube page or the Inside the Gamecocks podcast stream. I think it's the only two places you can get coffee. So certainly love that people enjoy both of those platforms, and as we continue to have a pretty successful little morning conversation every morning. Certainly have been very pleased with that. This is episode number 70, which doesn't seem like I've done this 70 times, but Inside the Gamecocks, the show, I think is on episode like 630 almost. So, wow, that's a lot. It's a lot of talking. That's a lot of words. So, certainly, thank you all for tuning in. No sports last night. Of course, softball game was canceled. We did have some news yesterday as George Wilson, defensive end from Campbell. May remember him as a recruit. Commits to South Carolina. That's kind of the main topic today. Another depth piece at edge. Kind of one of those that came out of nowhere. He committed to the Gamecocks when Will Muschamp was still the coach, a class of 2021. And he was one of the, guys that were kind of the mass exodus guys that decommitted, I think, during the season or kind of, during all that. But he was considered a big time recruit. A lot of upside. Ended up signing with Florida State, but didn't work out there. I think he got kind of recruited over. Didn't really put on a bunch of weight. He was real like 220, or I'm sorry, it's like 212 coming out of high school. He's listed at 230 now at Campbell. And Florida State, of course, had guys like Jared Verse that they brought in, and the transfer portal sort of bumped him. He goes to Campbell, kind of looks like a primary pass rushing specialist for there. I think he had 4 sacks last year, 5.5 tackles for loss. Always had pretty good get off as a recruit, if I remember. I didn't admittedly watch much Campbell, but what I could find, kind of like Damon Clowney at Charlotte, kind of a situational guy. So, talking about him, and we'll just get to that topic first because there's not a lot else. The house settlement, I'll mention this briefly, has been delayed again. And I've said this on the show and maybe here. I don't understand for the life of me why they decided to, the NCAA and its attorneys decided to dig in on roster limits. I would imagine this is kind of the same thing where they're kind of fussy about teams skirting the rules. If you say you can grandfather in players that are already on a roster, and if you like, for example, you look at football, you could legitimately expand your roster to a bunch of, 200 players, because everybody that's on the roster now would be grandfathered in and not subject to the limit. So I think there's a big how question there, especially with football and expense and cost, because everybody's moving money around. Like, okay, so we don't have to pay for this. Now we'll pay for that. Now the walk-ons, I don't think are expensive. What I would probably do, and there'll be somebody out there that may challenge this in court because everybody's doing that. It almost makes me sick, the amount of litigation that is rained down upon the NCAA. Enough. In some of these cases, like these guys getting in the portal that don't have any eligibility left because they think some court case somewhere is going to help. And that's not the Rasul Faison case. Rasul is a situation where he was at a junior college, which if they're going to let Diego Pavia be eligible and not count junior college, I don't think this 5-year window thing should apply. And they're the ones that opened that can of worms, right? They're the ones that, backed off and said, okay, but it doesn't mean guys that have been at, North Carolina and Duke playing football for 5 years, get another year because at some point they missed a couple of games because they were injured. I mean, there's just no case. And so the North Carolina Duke kids got turned down for that. But I guess some people somewhere think that. I don't know. To me, the roster limits because just about everybody in football, Power Five football, and you don't have to, but everybody's kind of coalescing around one scholarship limit per conference. Like with SEC, 85, like it normally is. You normally have 120, so now you have 105. So it's 15 walk-ons. Got to go. I don't. I think this could be accomplished by probably some common sense on the surface, but litigation wise, I don't know. Keeping schools from obviously trying to skirt the rules. I don't know. So we'll see. I just to get hung up in that, I would probably just go back and say, hey, look, most of the people that would not have a spot were walk-ons and not getting scholarships anyway. We don't want to get sued over scholarship limits. So we will say that I don't know that these are designated players that are grandfathered in if they didn't have a scholarship. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that to satisfy the judge, which I think the judge has been pretty reasonable with the whole thing. I mentioned yesterday, I thought it was a hell of a deal for the players and the student athletes, and I could really care less what any attorneys or agents or people that stand to profit more, the people that think they deserve half the revenue and all that good stuff. I don't think they're looking at the reality of this. Just from a standpoint of, we talk a lot in this country about privilege and that's not kind of that type of privilege. And that's a different conversation. But how setting up young people for life, we talk incessantly about college kids having student loan debt all the time. Talk. Those are all subjects in our country that get bandied about. And these guys are being rewarded heavily with real world tangible assets and benefits, seriously, for playing a sport. It is the sweetest on the job training program ever. I mean, look at how you get. That's a deal for a high school kid. And then in the transfer portal, I don't think some of the stupid money for average players, especially in basketball, is going to continue. But I still think college quarterbacks are going to be millionaires under the salary, the NIL cap or the rev share cap. I still think great players are going to get seven figures. So if you go and you prove yourself, if you get in the transfer portal or you're just, like South Carolina, staying there, you not only get a sweet on the job training program, you get to essentially get a professional salary while you're still training to be a professional. Why is this even a question? This is the sweetest deal on earth. This is this basically. There's a line in South Park where I think it's not Mr. Mack, Mr. Garrison goes, "Football players are better people," and they're joking, because there's some people that obviously when I was in school, being a football player was pretty cool in high school. And look, this basically just says, okay, yeah, you deserve a lot more than just your normal high school kid or whatever. Basketball too, and then women's basketball. All this talk about Title IX and the daggum, they deserve as much as the guys and all this stuff. For a sport that loses $7 million a year in some places, but that's growing in popularity and its value will continue to increase, and the players will be able to ride that wave up and benefit financially along with all the other benefits. Because keep in mind, the non-revenue share part of it for the women, it's the same as the men, especially like at South Carolina where they got a program and they care. According to Title IX, the actual Title IX, what it's meant for, you have to give the women's team the same benefits and uniforms and the pep band goes and all that as the men. And at South Carolina right now, the women they get a better crowd anyway. They got all that, they enjoy all that. But at other programs, you have to do the same thing, and that's fine. You know, great. All the educational benefits and intangible stuff you get, the benefits package. And they do. They by the law and the rules, you have to do the same thing. But listen to this. With most schools, and not just South Carolina with their elite program, most schools are doing 5% rev share for women's basketball. And so you'd kind of divide that up. And these girls or these female athletes, they're going to make more in college than in the WNBA. And that's kind of cool because that's the one sport left where you can like actually build a program with young players if they stay and don't get in the portal, because they stay. You have a women's basketball star for 3 to 4 years on average. And so that's a lot of money you can pile up. And it's more than what the WNBA is paying another trying to strike or whatever. So it's a good deal for them as well. I think it's a good deal for baseball because those guys are mostly walk-ons, right? And here's another thing about this roster limit thing that kind of disturbs me a little bit. And I'm not saying the judge is wrong for looking out for the walk-ons because I felt the same way. I was like, of all the people to get screwed, it's the guys that have to pay to go to school that work out with the team and get their brains beat in on the practice squad, or, they're trying to prove themselves. Those guys are valuable to your organization. We may never see them. Some of them end up on special teams, but they're out there busting their ass every day in practice. So, and so I don't have a problem with that. But I think, so I looked on X yesterday, and I'm going to get back to George Wilson, but I wanted to get to this first, and then because George Wilson's kind of newsy. So I always mention the news at the top. I'm circling back on that, so don't worry. But, so I'm looking at it, and I'm like, well, that's unfortunate. But what disturbs me a bit, and on X, the William and Mary girls soccer coach or ex-soccer coach or something, she had this long diatribe about how roster limits were unfair and they should just be determined school by school, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what you want to do in the revenue sports? I mean, I get it. William and Mary women's soccer may be able to go out and recruit a team that's larger than their rivals at their level of play. But I think sports have always had roster limits. I mean, I'm sure there's a sport out there that maybe you can have as many people on a roster as you want. But even back in like the Bear Bryant days where he would sign guys to track scholarships and stuff, I think it was capped to like 150. I mean, not, every pro sports league you can't have more than, that's why you have people that get cut. I mean, so basically what she's saying is schools should just deter. It's a very personal thing. Well, I thought we were talking about team limits, not individual limits, or a very school-based thing. So what you basically want to do is some of these schools that are spending like drunken sailors right now in the portal for revenue sports, you want to say, okay, not only can you just pay everybody everything, you can take everybody else's. You can. Texas can have 175 football players if they want. Well, what's that, in the NIL world and in the unlimited scholarship world, if you're Texas, you have an abundance of NIL money. I know there's supposed to be a cap, but they're going to do pretty good above the cap regardless. You can sign a guy, or you can sign 10, 15 players that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to sign, and you can keep A&M from getting them or whoever else. That's what Bear Bryant used to do. That's why they capped so there's sports common sense things in here. But what I would have done if I were the NCAA, and I'm not, and I'm thankful I'm not, because I would probably just look at myself in the mirror with shame and disgust every day and wonder why in the world I fight these battles that are common sense related, and then they lead to other bad things happening. I would have just grandfathered the walk-ons in and said, okay, well, these are mostly walk-ons. The scholarships have all gone up in all these sports. So we're not taking any scholarships away. We're adding scholarships for most sports, softball, baseball, men's basketball. We're adding opportunities financially, free, the benefits of education and all that. The money, the rev share probably wasn't going to walk-ons anyway. I mean, some schools could if they wanted, but these are mostly walk-ons that are not scholarship athletes as it is, that are going to lose their spot. So what we're going to do is keep the walk-ons that are there until they exhaust their eligibility. That's pretty easy. They're not costing you any money anyway, but a uniform. Oh, but some other schools are going to. He was grandfathered in. That's why you designate it to say this doesn't count for scholarship players. Your scholarship players you have, if you've been on scholarship, you're not a part of this discussion. Well, some school could cut scholarship guys. Yeah, they could, but that happens anyway. It didn't happen. That didn't happen as much as some of our friends in the Big Ten used to say about the SEC, but it happens. So I think there's a solution there. Looking at all angles. I just don't know why they fought it so much, because the thing that's going to get challenged is not, that's what the judge is concerned about. What's going to get challenged by the good folks out there that are just want to litigate this into oblivion and kill the sport, is the Deloitte NCAA NIL Clearing House. Trust me, there will be and what that is, for those that don't know, is so any NIL deal over $600, which is that's the money that's the minimum amount to claim it on your taxes, right? You got to be 1099 for that, and so anything over 600, you have to send the deal to a third-party clearinghouse built by Deloitte, who's a big marketing giant or whatever. It's going to be professional. The NCAA is not doing it, which is good. I didn't think they should set this thing up like compliance, because compliance is just very interesting. I'll say that. Not all compliance departments are, I always say this. Sometimes compliance departments believe that they work for the school and to navigate the complexities of NCAA rules and to always advocate for the school. Some compliance departments think that they're like plants from Indianapolis and they should be the rent-a-cops. That they're in there, investigate that they actually, they don't think they work for who pays them, right? They think they work for the Indianapolis. So they're policing everything. So I don't know. And you could tell the different schools that act that way. But I felt like with the marketing approval, if they did it in-house, that's a disaster. That's a disaster, because sometimes, how much you can fork out in NIL money is going to be at the mercy of how strict or, not strict your compliance person is with our marketing NIL compliance. So it's going to a third party, and they can either approve or say, no, you can't pay $10,000 for, something, a tweet, right? Or 100,000 for a tweet, maybe 10, depending on the following. And they'll have a mathematical formula based on social media followers, market size, what's everybody else that's as popular as you are getting, and you go accordingly. So it'll make NIL work as intended. The players and athletes who can get big endorsements and sell a bunch of jerseys and have big crowds at their autographs, they'll profit. And then the ones that are just there that, you have a school that paid $1 million for a freshman defensive tackle that only the 20% of its fan base that follows recruiting's ever heard of. Yeah, you can't do that anymore. That's got to maybe be out of rev share. And so that's going to get challenged because there's going to be a trial balloon. Somebody's inevitably some booster somewhere. And then this is the big problem too, is the schools allow this. Oregon, for example, they're in great shape with unlimited NIL and Phil Knight. They don't want any limits. It hurts their advantage. But there's gonna be a trial balloon. Somebody's gonna sign a deal that's outrageous. Some guy that's just a good player, not a great player, and then they're gonna run it through Deloitte. Deloitte's gonna say no, and then they're gonna sue. That I would be looking for protections with that, and that's probably why they're in Congress all the time. So anyway, the House settlement's delayed because of this roster limit thing, and so the Wild West continues in the transfer portal, and that gets me back to South Carolina. Uh, they needed help at edge, depth at edge, and Demond Clowney comes on board before the spring game last week. That's Clowney's brother. Played at Charlotte last year, kind of a reserve role situation. And then George Wilson pops up yesterday. And George Wilson, like I said, 6'4", 230. He's from the 757. I think he gives Carolina 3 from 757, Tidewater, Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads. I've talked about it before. Football hotbed. And it's also a place where I think, the more players you can get from there, the more you start to get. So that's good as far as Carolina's concerned. I think he's fast. He's got good get off. He's a pass rusher, probably not somebody that can set the edge. So I was thinking about this because I'll be honest. This was the type of guy I think that if you're just looking to add guys that can give you 4 or 5 snaps a game or steal a few snaps here and there. I mean, Clowney and Wilson's fine. I mean, one or the other, I don't care. It's hope for the best for one, and then whoever the other guy is, hopefully he can play. Because ultimately, we're talking about guys that are down the depth chart a bit, maybe second team if they come in and surprise. But when you start talking about 2, you're like, okay, well, how exactly you can use these guys? That's 2 guys. If you have one injury, if Desmond Umazulu goes down, these guys are really going to have to play. And they're both older. The older's good. They're both second window, though. Did not have the winter program at South Carolina with Luke Day and his strength staff. With Clowney, just keep coaching him up. I think he's big enough, strong enough, all that. With Wilson, 6'4", 230, that's light for an SEC edge. So what I was thinking was, okay, if you're looking at the room before Wendell Gregory, for example, got in the portal. So Wendell Gregory was tracking at about 6'4", 245, 6'3", 245. Can you put 10 to 15 pounds on George Wilson between now and the season of muscle and bulk and get him ready to go and play whatever role Wendell was going to play? Wendell kind of left before, we knew anything. I thought he was kind of a sleeper because he had some good natural pass rushing ability out of high school, but he's at Oklahoma State now. And so can you get what you were going? And it's not a money ball approach, but it is because what you're doing is you're kind of replacing like in Moneyball, the baseball movie. They're buying runs, replacing runs. What this is essentially you're buying snaps. So with Wendell Gregory, what snaps was he going to play, and can you get that out of these 2 guys combined? Or is Clowney something else? And can you get that out of George Wilson, his final year? And you like your chances more with a guy that's been at Florida State, that's played at Campbell, and that's played football for a while and been through seasons and played in games and all that good stuff. Then you do maybe a younger player, like a true freshman, like Anthony Addison. So and maybe you're doing it in the aggregate. Maybe you're just kind of saying, okay, Gilbert Edmonds gone. You don't have Wendell anymore. all the guys that kind of rotated in last year. So in the aggregate, can we get that many quality snaps and that much production out of these two guys? And maybe throw Anthony Addison in there or Quay Dodd. Can you get that? Because uh, I I think personally, when you look at the edge room, and look, I haven't heard anything about Bo Atkinson. I can't imagine Wilson or Clowney were bank breaking as far as NIL goes, and I still think they do want to D-tackle. And that's the position. I've been clear about that from the start, that I think you know, they'll go try to get, to use resources on that. Not that they aren't at edge, and not that they wouldn't with a guy like Bo Atkinson, but when you're talking about depth, depth is depth, right? So, maybe that's what you're doing. I think Desmond Umeozulu's spring game performance was encouraging. Players obviously get better. He's got a lot of ability, 4-star guy, third year. It's probably about time. So maybe he can start. I mean, I thought last year, I was like, boy, Dylan Stewart, the Maryland DC bookend to edge deal was pretty cool. Desmond on one side, Dylan on another. And then you still have Brian Thomas Jr., who can give you snaps. Or maybe if Thomas Jr. starts, I think probably the coaches would think Thomas Jr. at this point. But, and then you got JT Gear is in the mix, hopefully, still. And, and I'm not like breaking any news here. Just I haven't heard Beamer mention him in a little bit, but I thought he looked good in the spring game. Really did. He was one of my top 13 players, especially early. But yeah, he's still there for now on the team. And we'll see sort of how everything goes with that. But, so you got that. And you got, and look, I'm not saying, I probably stepped in it there. I'm not saying that guy's getting in the portal. As right now, I don't know. There's like whispers that out there. So I don't want to sit here and break down a guy on a podcast, and then, because podcasts get listened to all day, and then he gets in the portal and it's like, this is stupid. So, and I don't know that he will. There was a lot of talk when Cram Pringle got in the other day, and then that's kind of quieted down a little bit, but we'll see. So if Gear definitely is a possibility, if as things stand today, let's just leave it like that. I probably stepped in it there, but please don't take it and run with it. So you look at it like that, and then and if injuries happen, that's a different story. And then I'll just address Jaylen Brown, because everybody asked about it. As of right now, I said it yesterday, I'm not talking about it. I mean, I'm not including him in any kind of breakdown until, if he gets cleared and he's back, great. But as of right now, I'm operating as if they lost two guys instead of one. You lost one, and he's never coming back, Wendell Gregory. Although you never say never, because guys do tend to pop back. But so there's that. And then the number two part of it is, with Brown, he's out for now. So let's just move forward as if he'll be out then. So anyway, kind of got sidetracked there with my own thing. So that's the story there. But, so I think Umeozulu, that progress is encouraging, So at that point, you're talking about who can do what Gilbert, Edmond / Umeozulu / Gear, whoever they rotated through there at edge last season, who can do that and give you those snaps, and then and that's what I think with Wilson and Clowney, to a certain extent, Addison. I think that's the plan there. Now, the other issue there, and I alluded to this, is who's replacing Kyle Kennard. I don't know that you can replace that production I think the hope is Dylan Stewart replaces that production, and then somebody does maybe in the aggregate, like we said, 6.5 sacks. With everybody combined on the other edge, maybe that's the case. So who replaces that? I'm not so much. I'm not totally concerned about Kennard as losing Kennard's, and it sounds crazy. So please bear with me. I'm not as concerned about replacing the 11.5 sacks as I am the tackles for loss in the run game and in general his defense against the run because he was pretty doggone stellar playing the run. Sometimes he'd get caught up field or whatever. And there were other guys that were not. Gilbert Edmond was an example of that sometimes last year. Teams, LSU game was an example of he got blocked. So, and Brian Thomas Jr., that's been the thing he's had to work on his whole time here. He's always been able to rush the passer. So that's my concern. And when you lose Brown or you take Brown out of the equation for now, it's a 270-pound D end on that side that's pretty, I think he could hold up. So that would be my biggest concern right now when you take depth out of it and you're talking about starting edge. And I don't know that Wilson or Clowney are those kind of guys. Maybe if you get another D tackle, Devontae Miles is kind of your strong side end or edge. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out. So if I have an overall concern with edge, it's not necessarily pass rush right now because George Wilson and Damon Clowney can rush the passer. It's more like who's gonna play the run as well as Kyle Kennard did last year, because that was big if you remember. Kennard, some team try to run wide, he'd drop him in the backfield. He was one of the better defensive ends against the run we've seen through here. And I don't know that George Wilson is that answer. But back to him, good pass rusher. Obviously, sometimes it's interesting these days in college football, the journeys. Here's a guy that was committed for a while, and he's coming back home. So that's 2 defensive end / edge in the portal class. We'll see what pops up at D tackle. Continue to track everything else in the transfer portal. Going to be pretty happy. I think the football portal closes tomorrow. So that's good because my heart breaks every day seeing these Group of 5 and FCS guys and Louisiana Monroe's getting killed, and they had a breakthrough season. That's the unfortunate part about it. And then these guys are getting in late after spring practice. There was probably a market for some of these Louisiana Monroe guys the first window. Why didn't you just do that? Because really, maybe you wanted to stay at your school and you were happy, but now money. So I don't know. It's interesting, folks. Very, very interesting, the times we live in college athletics. Got a big morning show coming up later today. G.A. Mangus. Wonder what he thinks about all this. Former Gamecock offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, good friend of mine, great guy from the Spurrier era. Obviously, part of a lot of great moments in Carolina sports, coaching high school football in the area, coaching offense. One of the most gifted play callers I've ever been associated with, and an all-around great guy. He's joining Jamie and also Derek Scott, the voice of Carolina basketball and baseball, will join. He can talk a little bit about the basketball portal and kind of what the thought process is over there. I know a lot of you have had questions about that. Baseball this weekend at the University of Kentucky. It's going to be tough. Carolina could be like a top 5 team and go up to Kentucky and lose baseball series, and now they're pretty good and all that good stuff. And Derek will also talk about that today on the morning show. Phil and I will be along with the show to follow. Chief Sports app, YouTube, Chief South Carolina, also on X at the Big Spur 24/7. Want to thank our sponsor, Palmetto Golf and Belt. Boy, Brandon's selling some stuff, man, on the Big Spur. He also sponsors the PPG Forum and is one of the sponsors of that. And every day I read a post, I just got the belt, and maybe if you did this. So I love helping small business. If you're ever interested in doing anything, the price will be right, especially if you're a good person and a Gamecock and all that. So we will, hit me up, jcshurburtt@gmail.com if you ever want to do anything. And so we'll be back here on Chief Sports South Carolina, thebigspur.com, inside the Gamecocks, blah, blah, blah. Later today, the morning show starts at 10. This has been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Have a wonderful Thursday, everyone. Holla at you soon.